For those of you who haven't heard, Georgia principal and founder of TNT Academy, Nancy Gordeuk, is currently under fire for racist comments she made at their recent graduation ceremony. I wanted to understand exactly what happened to lead to this event. So I did some research, and based on news reports, Facebook posts, and tweets from people who actually attended the graduation, apparently the graduation was already over before Principal Gordeuk realized that she had forgot to allow the valedictorian to give his speech. Now, for those of you who've ever attended a graduation, you know that once those tassels are turned and those hats are tossed in the air, it's chaos. People are hugging, they're kissing, they're crying. The students and their families are celebrating this awesome moment. So I'm pretty sure you can imagine it's going to take some time to get everyone's attention. So Principal Gordeuk asked everyone to come back in so that this young man could have his time to give his speech as the valedictorian. Once everyone was calmed down, the young man, based on reports, was able to go up and start his speech. But at some point during his speech, a man from the audience came up to the front of what I call the congregation, because it was in a church, and started recording the audience. Now, why he did that, I don't know. This upset Principal Gordeuk, so she actually stopped the young man during the speech to confront the man who was actually recording the audience. They apparently had some words, and after going back and forth, she asked security or the police to escort him out of the building. When that request was made, then she started receiving boos from the audience for having him escorted out, and that's when people started recording what happened.
Do this on graduation now.
I'm thinking y'all owe this young man an apology, especially that goober that was coming through with his little thing.
Got y'all delivering these.
That was so rude. Where are you, you little coward? Come on back up here, let's talk.
What? You heard of them.
Look at everybody walking out. They're walking out.
Oh, look.
I agree, right? I agree with that.
That's why I don't know why they
I wish they had let these folks get through with this.
Most rudest people I've ever seen in my life. Close those doors. Close the doors. Now. Close the doors. Now. Close the doors. You people are being so rude to not listen to this speech. It was my fault that we missed it in the program.
People walking out.
Look who's leaving, all the black people.
That most people are having with Principal Gordeuk's remark is the fact that she singled out the black race, despite the fact that people from both races were leaving the ceremony at that time. From what I've read from the posts that have been placed on Facebook and in some of the news reports, people from both sides of the race had already grown frustrated with the way she was talking to the audience throughout the entire ceremony. So there was already some tension that was happening even before all of this had occurred. So this is my take on it. The older I get, the more I realize that racism is probably never going to go away. Ignorance is always going to have its own home. And while we can't change the fact that racism will probably always be here, I can change how I react to it. I can monitor how I teach my children about it. I think the problem is we're trying to eradicate something that's destined to always be here. At some point, we have to change our strategy. Of course, anytime I see posts that have this type of controversy in it, I'm interested in seeing what exactly is going to be posted in the comments. And of course, there are different views from both sides of the spectrum. There are a lot of Caucasian people who feel that the black race is overusing this race card, or we are overdoing it when it comes to racism. And this is where I'm going to say this as nice as I possibly can. If you have not walked for one moment in my shoes, then you can't speak for 1 second about my struggle. My son is only 12 years old, and he is still facing bouts of racism that I prayed years ago that any of my children would never have to face. He is still being called the N-word. He is still being discriminated against. He is still being set aside for certain things because of the fact that he's black. Now, these are not things that we assume. These are things that he's been told face to face. The only way I know to encourage those around me is through using my family's personal story. And I'm going to use my son for an example because he is facing more racism than my 2 daughters. And when it comes to the African American male, chances are, yeah, they're going to be the first one who is stereotyped, the first one who's going to be set aside, the first one who's going to be discriminated against. And my son, who's only 12, is already experiencing that. But it is important that me and my husband teach him how to deal with racism without automatically categorizing the entire Caucasian race. Because I think the problem here now is that if you are Caucasian, then you're going to automatically be put in the group of being a bigot just because of the color of your skin. If you are black, then you're going to automatically be put in the category of being thugs or baby making, welfare receiving machines because you're black. It is unfair to categorize one entire race as being a certain way based on the reactions or based on the actions of one person. And that's where the problem is lying. What we need to do is address the issues based on the people who actually make the offense. This group punishment is not going to work, and all this is going to do is cause more tension in between the races. We have to understand that racism actually comes from both sides of the fence. There are black people who don't like white people. There are white people who don't like black people. There are black people who don't like black people. There are white people who don't like white people. And it's not just black and white, it's all races. It's Native Americans, it's Hispanics, it's Muslims. Wherever you are from, whatever your race may be, everyone goes through or everyone experiences the brunt of racism. It's just up to us to decide how we're going to react to it. My son, when we first moved to this city, at that time he was only 7, 8 years old, experienced this when he was invited by some other boys in the community to come out and play. Now at that time he was the only black kid in the neighborhood. The boys that invited him were white. They were little boys that came over and invited him. Me, naturally, I thought that was sweet. I thought it was wonderful, only for them to lure him outside and attack him. My son came back upstairs with scratches on his chest and eggs all over him, where they had egged him, scratched him up, and told him to go away. They didn't want him around. Now, this is him at 8 years old. It is at that moment, at that pivotal moment, when his thoughts about another race were beginning to come into effect. Well, for the first time, he paid attention to the fact that I'm black, they're white, and I'm being treated this way. It was up to me and my husband to advise him and to instruct him and educate him on how to deal with this without categorizing the entire white race. And this is what we told him. The fact remains is that because you are African American, you are going to face some sort of racism at one point in time. But just because these people made this ignorant decision and they're teaching their children this ignorant mindset, that does not mean that all white people have that same feeling about you. But what you're going to have to do is really be careful in who you choose to be your friends. Of course, my husband and I were angry. And we were all up in our feelings because when my son came in with the scratches on his chest and the eggs on his clothes, I wanted to go and play some hands on some people. But then I knew that that was not the way to go. We had to go and speak with the young boy's parents, and we just made the decision because the parents were stuck in their ways and it was obvious that they were going to stand behind their children's actions. So we made the decision for our son not to have anything to do with their children, and we made it abundantly clear that if it happened again, that there would be repercussions, and there wasn't going to be any rioting, it wasn't going to be any physical altercation. We were going to do it in an intelligent, lawful manner, and they fully understood where we were coming from, and the incident never happened again. Thinking that we had handled the situation and praying that this would be the last time he would encounter that, we moved on. Now, mind you, my son went to a predominantly white school, so he was one of only 2 African American kids in his entire class. But keeping in mind his experiences from the summer, my son applied what my husband and I had taught him about how to deal with the students, because there were a few students in his class that didn't want to have anything to do with him. The school year begins to progress along, and then there was an incident when he came home from school crying one day because his teacher had pulled him in front of the entire classroom and chastised him for picking at some kids from the special needs class. I'm trying to make this as quick as I possibly can because I'm trying to make a point here. Apparently, after lunch, it was my son's job to go through, or before lunch, go through and put hand sanitizer in each one of the kids' hands so that they can go in for lunch. While he was doing that, one of his friends from another class that was leaving out saw him. My son spoke to him. The little boy did some sort of move and TJ was laughing. While he was laughing, the teacher comes out of the cafeteria and the students that's in his class tells the teacher that he was just laughing at some of the kids from the special needs class that were also in the hall. Of course, my son told him, no, I did not do that. I was laughing at a friend of mine. So she chastises him then, takes him to the classroom, pulls him up in front of the class, and asks the class, what was he doing? The entire class said that he was laughing and picking on the kids from the special needs class. It embarrassed him. He was humiliated. He was like, I didn't do it. She was like, apparently you did because everybody is saying that you did. And so she threatened to write him up. Now, we have special needs people in our family. So my son is very sensitive to that because he has little cousins that are special needs, and he's very sensitive to them, wanting to make sure that no one bothers with him. But so this is something that we don't tolerate in our own family. My son comes home, mind you, let me back up. My son comes home and he tells me that the teacher had said that they had evidence of it on videotape. Now, I know my son, he can be a clown at times, but I know that when it comes to that, especially with special needs people, he does not pick or mess with anyone of that nature. So when he came home and told me that the teacher had said that she had it on videotape and that she could prove he was lying, I was like, okay, well, we'll handle this. Well, I called the school, spoke with the teacher, told her my husband and I wanted to come up there and have a meeting. We wanted to see this tape because that just did not sound like my son. She, in return, told me, along with the principal, we'll watch the tape and we will let you know what happened. Of course, that wasn't happening. I told her I needed to see this for myself. This does not sound like my son. So after going back and forth and literally demanding that they allow us to come up there and see the tape, we finally agreed to it. The next day, we went up there. They pulled in the teacher, the principal, and some counselor person that came in. They did not pull out the tape and allow us to watch it because they had actually watched the tape before we came in. So after they watched the tape, it was discovered that TJ was never laughing at the students from the special needs class. He was actually laughing and joking around with his friend. Of course, they had a million apologies and the matter was quickly rectified. But once again, we was put back in the situation of coming and talking to our son again about this. The reality is, when you are of the African American race, and if you're male, there are stereotypes that you are automatically gonna face no matter what you do. And this is my message to everyone, whether you're white, black, red, Hispanic, Muslim, Asian, no matter what. It is up to us to decide how we teach our children to react to this. Now, we are painfully honest with our children. And the painful truth, the brutal truth is, when it comes to success, when it comes to their education, when it comes to their careers, and everything that they want to do in life, they just can't do good. They have to be the best at everything that they want to be because of the stereotypes that are automatically assigned to the African American race. Now, we can't always blame white people or any other race for all of the stereotypes that are placed on us because we have a hand in that as well. If we do not want to be categorized as thugs, if we don't want to be categorized as uneducated, if we don't want to be categorized as baby-making machines, then we shouldn't do those exact same things. With all of the riots, with all of the things that are going on in wake of these young men who are losing their lives at the hand of police officers, those who are rioting and stealing and looting and continuing to break the law, the only thing that you're doing is making the case even harder for your own race. The fact is, there are going to be people who are going to play the race card for their own personal benefit. There are black people who simply do not care. There are black people who are out for themselves, and any opportunity that comes up where they can get on and they can take advantage of the situation to appease their own agenda, they're going to do that. But that's not necessarily the case for everyone. Every police officer is not a bad police officer. I thank God for police officers. I have police officers in my family. I have great friends who are police officers who are there to protect and to serve, and they take their responsibilities greatly. So it's very important that we don't inflict a stereotype on one person because of the actions of the other. Focus on those people and those people alone, and work on getting justice based on the sins of that particular group of people, not the entire race, not the entire police department, not the entire school system, not the entire government, not the entire church family. We have to learn to focus on the actual problem instead of putting everyone in one basket and treating everyone as if we all committed the same sin. Because my son went up to a higher grade, he then had to go to a different school. And of course, he had his issues there. Had another issue where he had students that were calling him the N-word as if that was his real name. They refused to call him by his actual name. So once again, my husband and I are back out at this different school with a different principal and a different staff. We set up a meeting to talk to them. The principal, who was white, the school counselor, who was black, and another school counselor who was white, were all in the room. The difference is this particular principal took the situation seriously, and he immediately handled it. He understood, and we understood, that while we could not do anything about what these particular students' parents were teaching them at home, he could control what was said and done in his school. He wanted to make sure that all students knew that it was important to respect each other no matter what color you were. Now see, the thing about that is, it could have went terribly wrong if my husband would have went into that office frustrated, not only because of what was going on with our son then, but based on all of the things that had happened to him before. But instead of categorizing the principal into the category of all of the other people because he was white, we decided, okay, this man had nothing to do with it. We're just going to address this one situation and then take it from there. And because of that, we were able to have a respectable meeting, come to an agreement, and get the situation resolved. To my Caucasian brothers and sisters, what you're going to have to understand, that even though you may not be prejudiced, and even though you may have never stereotyped or mistreated somebody because of the color of their skin, there's still a lot of people who's doing it. So you're going to have to reach deep down inside and become more sensitive to the fact that while you're not guilty of it, that does not mean other people are not doing it. Black people, if you do not want to be considered a thug, stop acting like a thug. And understand at the same time that it is very hard for people to take us seriously when we've got all of these riots going on. And even if it's not in a riot, we're condoning this mentality anytime we produce these videos and make movies and make songs that are filled with profanity and filled with talking about drugs and filled with talking about beating women. It's time for us to name a solution. My solution is to continuously educate my kids on the fact that racism does exist, encourage them to love people no matter what, and strengthen them and support them in their education and in all of their career goals so that they can become a strong pillar in this community. The best way to start is by empowering our youth and empowering our families and building up our communities, and acknowledging the fact that we do have some bad apples that are continuing to make this a hard race, but together we can do it. Together we can do it. If you want to change, then be the change that you would like to see in others. This has been First Lady B, and I hope it's been a blessing for you. You all have a blessed day. Bye-bye.